Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Phil Stevens, you're on Iron Radio. I am a coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and maker of many wonderful things.
Nice. This is Dr. Mike Nelson, and associate professor at the Carrigan Institute, creator of the Flex Diet certification, which will open again in January next year. And in Oklahoma City, we'll be back home for the first time in almost 2 months on Tuesday.
Traveling man.
Yeah.
All right. And I am Lonnie Lowry. I've been a exercise physiology and nutrition professor of about 25 years. That number keeps going up, right, over the years of the podcast. Former competitive bodybuilder of about that much time as well. And I don't know, writer, other stuff, consultant. Okay. I have 2 bits of news, and then we're going to get to the topic, which is going to be mindset, more or less. And Phil will fill us in, of course. All right. So this first one, a paper came out this year on high-dose fish oil. I'm a fan. In fact, I was talking to someone. I'm going to try to be respect her confidentiality, but someone at ISSN, and I was mentioning how much fish oil I take or you take and other people, and they're like, I can't believe how much fish oil Phil takes. If you think about it, you'll know who I'm talking about, because somebody who would know your dietary and digestive habits. But she's like, I can't believe, does he know that's uncharted territory about what's going to happen to his gut and this and that. And I'm like, there's a lot of science. Anyway, this is from ErgoLog. I would encourage people to go check this out. It's just ergo-log.com. There's some typos. I don't always agree with everything I read here, but then, when do you? But the point being is it's a great, shotgun approach to what's happening with different nutrients and supplements. They'll talk about different herbs and stuff like that. But anyway, this one is fish oil doubles strength gains through strength training. We have written several times about the positive effects of fish oil supplements on people over 60 who train with weights. According to American Sports Scientist, younger strength training novices can also benefit from fish oil supplements. Says Jeffrey Helison of Baylor University and the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center got 218 healthy subjects. Okay, that's a typo, because I looked at the paper. There's 21, not 218.
It's
a big difference. Yeah. Aged 18 to 40, who did strength training 3 times a week for 10 weeks. Each session consisted of full body workouts, etc. Half got the placebo, of course, and half got high-dose fish oil. 4.5 grams of fish oil per day, he says, of which 2.28 grams was EPA and 1.58 grams was EPA. I think he means DHA. Anyway, there's some typos here. High dose, the take-home is high-dose fish oils, 2.25 EPA, 1.5 DHA. That's often how this ratio comes out, right? Because there's some people who try to tease apart, well, EPA is not DHA. They do slightly different. Okay. In any case, he did a little breakdown here, and insofar as we can trust this, because I would suggest anybody just go pull the paper. It's from the Journal of the ISSN, actually. Mike and I are intimately familiar with. Received August 2022, actually, accepted January 2023. So it's from really early this year, but it just caught my eye because of what I saw on ErgoLog, right, and how they kind of go scan for juicy tidbits. According to the analysis on ErgoLog, bench press and squat, they did body comp as well with DEXA. Bench press, it looks like the placebo group increased 7%, and the fish oil supplement group 18%. So that's more than double. On squat, the placebo group had a plus 18% gain, and the fish oil plus 29%. And again, this is from the Journal of the ISSN. If I go look at the actual study, it's just what you would think. They just kind of break it down in more scientific terms. Randomized placebo-controlled design was used to examine the effects of fish oil supplements. Concentrated source, and they use DEXA for body comp, et cetera. Now, I don't think they found any body composition changes, but for the power people out there, the strength gains that's enticing. And, there is, of course, some background. There's a lot of stuff in here about why they suspected, fish oil might increase anabolic signaling in different ways and this and that, and how it gets incorporated into muscle membranes and all that kind of stuff. So that's our first bit of news. I think everybody on this podcast takes fish oils. This is more than I take. 4.5 grams. That's a whopping dose. But oftentimes you see this stuff, it's a dose response, right? It's more is better, up to quite a bit. I mean, I've seen studies with up to 18 grams of gross fish oil, just, not EPA and DHA. But I think our listeners know that's what you look for. Those are the active ingredients. That's a lot. I get triple strength fish oils from Sam's Club, and those, I take 3 of those usually, 2 to 3. I got to be careful because if I'm taking aspirin or other things, I'm afraid of like little micro bleeds and stuff like that. I don't want that. But what do you take, Phil? Do you know the dose, or do you just take like 2 or 3? How do you do it?
Yeah, at this point, I'll just grab some a couple times a day. And then grab 2 or 3, throw them off. And I've gotten so lazy with stuff. Like from years ago of like measuring everything, I just gave up on that. And it's like, I'm just going to grab some and throw it in my mouth. Because it gets to the point it drives you nuts. But no, there were times that I've taken extremely high doses, over 20 a day.
Wow.
And, you get to the point where you're squatting and always breaking capillaries in your eyes and stuff. And it's like, okay, time to back off a little
right.
bit.
Time to back off.
I squatted 225 and I blew blood vessels in my eyes. But and like you said, are a little prick, and like it's noticeable when you're taking high dose. Like you'll bleed easily, and then you have to think, like, man, what's the chances of me stroking out?
No, exactly, exactly. Like even if it's just a micro kind of thing, if it's in the wrong place, like sometimes this sounds weird, but if I was taking lots of aspirin, for example, on top of it, I would get little dark lines in my nail beds. Kind of, I'm like, oh my god, am I like micro bleeding? Like,
exactly.
Not cool. So I would think that's probably the main side effect. I don't want people to think fish oils are very toxic. I mean, they're food. Look, I could say, look what Inuits eat, dozens and dozens of grams, although there are probably some genetic responses that are different there. But yeah, I just kind of like you, Phil. I'm like, I take 2 or 3 of the triple strength ones. I know that's like about 2 grams of EPA plus DHA, 1 to 2 grams. That's way more than most people get. Most people get less than 1/4 of a gram, from a regular diet. And I've heard that Americans are worse than Europeans, and that's probably not surprising. But Mike, I know that you're meticulous. Do you watch the dose exactly, or have you kind of relaxed?
I have for many years. I've done all sorts of crazy fish oil experiments. I've worked with Dr. Doug Bilvis at the omega-3 test, so I've been doing a blood test on myself and clients now for, almost 10 years. I've looked at like hundreds of people's of what are their essential fats, even what is their red cell membrane content. So how well does it get incorporated into the membrane itself? And this is anecdotal, I think the levels, at least in the people I've been testing over the years, have gone up. Early on, like everyone was just almost borderline frank deficient. It was crazy.
Yep.
Where now I still see levels that are low, but they're not frank deficiencies. They're like, yeah, you might be okay, but if you have a risk of cardiovascular disease and some other health stuff, going higher is probably going to be better for most people still. I may have, and another buddy, 2 other buddies, we may have ran the experiment where to see how much fish oil we can take to see what actually happens.
Wow. Okay.
And I want to say I had to switch to the liquid because I think EPA DHA, I was trying to get like 10 grams a day in for 6 weeks, which again, I would not recommend people do this.
Right.
But it does appear, at least from a saturation level in the blood and in the red blood cell membrane, at some point you just can't take more and shove more in. Like we all 3 of us found that there's a saturation point. One guy was taking twice that amount for a while. He was super crazy. And it just gets to a high level and it kind of stays there. So I don't think there's a huge reason to mega dose stuff. Like you said, INR ratio, your bleeding stuff, high. The studies that were done on that don't show a huge difference. But again, they were not using super, super high doses of fish oil either.
Yep.
So some caution with that. There might be some, autoimmune stuff or some weird stuff if you start doing super high doses for long periods of time. But in general, I'm around 2 to 4 grams is what I would say most people should probably take. Like I typically take 2 to 3 grams, and that seems to be, depending on who you ask. Like if I use the red blood cell membrane number, actually I like to be a little bit on the higher side, around 8 to 9%, which by a lot of standards is still considered pretty high. But I haven't seen any negative issues with that or anything, other than cost. But the reality is fish oil has gotten to be quite inexpensive lately compared to what it used to be. I mean, you can get pretty high dose stuff now for really not that much money. And like you guys said, there's not too much of a negative effect, especially at normal-ish doses.
Right. Yeah. It's just one of those things that if you don't seek it, it's not going to happen, right? The American food supply is just not going to give it to you, and you have to go purposely seek it. Almost everybody I know, I've said, as far as nutrition profs, they eat berries and they purposely seek omega-3s. You just have to. If you're not eating salmon, I don't know, 3-4 times a week, you might as well just supplement it, And then there was some concern in the early days. Oh, but it could be mercury contaminated. No, not the pills. Generally, no. The bigger companies are responsible. They're not going to. I'm not going to say this is across the board, of course, but heavy metal contamination like mercury and stuff usually not a problem with Consumer Reports said not a problem with Walgreens, Sam's Club, several different sources. So I would suggest getting the double and triple strength. Just because you're after the EPA and DHA, mostly. I know there's some other beneficial long chain HUFA, right, highly unsaturated fats in there, but generally you're looking for combined dose of EPA and DHA. I look for about 1 to 2 grams, and I know that's way, way more. Benefits usually start to occur between right around a half a gram, I think, of supplementation. I'm painting with a broad brush here. So 500 combined EPA plus DHA, and I'm getting, triple that probably. But yeah, I would look for double and triple strength. I would suggest everybody go check out the actual paper, The Effect of Fish Oil Supplementation on Resistance Training-Induced Adaptations by Jeffrey Helison and colleagues. And again, I think it was Baylor. Interesting stuff, even if the numbers aren't exact, because it looks like the Ergolog article, and again, it's just a great sweep for what's cool out there. But I would go check out the actual paper as well. The bottom line is it's a statistically significant increase. And like with almost anything else with fish oils, when you replace a relative deficiency, good things are going to happen. I mean, normally I get red flag. Like, you can't tell me that helps depression and joints and is anabolic and it's like, yeah, but you're replacing something the body is really missing. So, yeah, all these things may in fact happen. Generally, that is a red flag. Anyway.
Yeah. And side note, unfortunately, even farm-raised salmon now, because of the way they switched the feed source a couple of years ago, does still have some EPA and DHA, but unfortunately, it's way lower than what it used to be. So even people who are having farm-raised salmon and expecting them to get a sufficient amount of fish oil, I've seen this even in a couple of people with just direct testing too. And unfortunately, it's better, but they still end up being low because of the way they switch the feed source.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah, I was pissed off when I heard that. Dr. Doug told me that a couple of years ago. I was like, what?
Oh,
we screwed that up too?
Yeah. This is why we can't be completely averse to supplements. Oh, that's so, it's official and it's not, how there's the anti-supplement, people that are just so passionate about it. It's like, this is one of the examples where I'm sorry, we live in a polluted environment. We live in an overly industrialized agricultural kind of system. Just go take the frickin' supplement to get the dose that you might need. Yeah.
Still some anti-fish oil people too. A couple of years ago, I had a guy ranted on my Facebook page. Went to bed at night, didn't reply back to him. And they're crazy when you come back in the morning. They've replied to themselves 6 times.
Oh, right.
And his last comment was, How dare you keep recommending fish oil supplements? You might as well put bullets in a gun and play Russian roulette with your health. I'm like, oh my God, over fish oil?
Oh
like,
my
this
God.
is what we've come to?
Right. It's food. I mean, think about all the crazy like herbs and botanicals out there that are essentially drugs. And this is just food, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you're saying about emails. We've gotten some over the years, even relatively recently, the kind of what's the matter with you kind of emails. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I get those from my newsletter
just
too.
reporting on what I'm seeing here. Okay. The other very different bit of news I have is I was putting together some slides actually for you, Mike, for your online seminar thing about the different products that come out of coffee. Like I'm interested in spent coffee grounds. I know that sounds weird to a lot of people, but when you hydrolyze, when you pre-treat those, you break them down a little bit. They have all, prebiotic fiber. They're like 15% protein, all these, antioxidants, polyphenols. That's just waste. I've been looking at vendors for this kind of stuff. I can't find one. So I don't know if any listeners would know, but I'm going to, because you hear a lot of lip service about companies that do it for biofuel, but not food grade, right?
Right.
And I'm like, how about we stop dumping that in landfills? And I've seen all these studies about you put them in bakery products and it increases the healthy bacteria, like bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, whatever, with the prebiotic fibers. One paper talked about how I think it was related to more movement activity throughout the day, because even though there's not a lot of caffeine in spent coffee grounds, they're still, they're going to have some of the chlorogenic acid or other things that weren't completely extracted when you brew the coffee. Anyway, these aren't spent. These are just regular coffee grounds. But have you guys seen this product, Grinds? They're coffee pouches. They're supposed to be like tobacco pouches that you put between your cheek and gum.
Really?
And here, I'll just show you from Amazon. I'll tell you here. Grinds coffee pouches and different flavors. They're either 25 or 50 milligrams of caffeine. And they show them. They're just a little pouch, just like you might think. And partly this is to help people get off, tobacco, because I can't think of anything about coffee between your cheek and gum necessarily that's going to be carcinogenic like tobacco might be. Although it is direct exposure, like you're directly touching it and holding it there. But it says the claims here are nicotine-free alternative tobacco, energy boost with 20 to 25 milligrams of caffeine. And Mike, you and I, of course, know, and Phil does too, the buccal delivery is fast, right? You're going to get this caffeine
very fast.
I did some work on gum once, on that military gum you can also get on Amazon. And before 15 minutes, they were already like, you could see that line in the blood, from none to, wow, here it comes. And that's quite different from when you drink coffee. It might take, I'm going to paint with a broad brush again, but maybe double that, double or triple that amount of time.
Minutes.
Yeah. But it says energy boost equals about a quarter cup of coffee. And again, it has the double caffeine version of this too, the double mocha with 50 milligrams. And I'm not trying to sell it. I haven't even tried it, but I might. I'm just a fan of coffee stuff, and it's a neat product that I thought, that's pretty cool. I wasn't able to find any products that actually had the spent coffee grounds, the hydrolyzed spent coffee grounds, which I would like to see. But this is an alternative use for coffee, I think. And then there's some video reviews. It's 4 out of 5 stars as far as the reviews, 9,870 ratings. So people are jumping on this stuff. And there's a 30%
staining of your teeth because it's in close proximity. That was my first thought. But.
Yeah, Mike, I said that to Kelly this morning. I'm like, is that going to make my teeth yellow? Probably.
I'm wired, but I got butter teeth, man.
Yeah. Well, I imagine if you're using tobacco, that's going to do that too.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So, yeah. But just to kind of play around, I remember Chris Shugart used to play around with, like, he would chew nicotine gum, and I know you're kind of playing with fire. That's a very addictive substance, but he wasn't a smoker. He had no intention to be a smoker. He would just kind of play around with nicotine gum. He was the first person I knew that did that. But the point is, why not, play around with some of these alternate deliveries, that you don't really think about. Again, this doesn't have any nicotine in it, but talking about more so the caffeine, but also maybe some of the chlorogenic acid. Or I have to look, actually, I don't know how much CGA would get across that mucosal barrier, but yeah, Grinds coffee products. I'm interested. If anybody, listeners, you try this stuff, let us know. It's pretty popular.
We need to make our own brand now, and we're going to put caffeine and nicotine in it at the same time.
Some kind of powdered fish oil in there too.
Yeah, a little fish oil, a little
right?
CDP choline.
Yep.
Not a half bad idea.
Nootropic stuff for buccal delivery.
Yeah.
Right through the cheek. Yep.
Well,
you think some of these large coffee places, if there's a use for the grounds,
yeah, like the tart cherry
my
industry.
God, you'd think they'd jump on board. Like they're just trashing stuff.
I could be missing something, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was already done. That was my assumption.
Well, like I said, there's a company back, 10 years ago in the UK. They won all these awards, but it was for biofuel because you can extract, of course, the oils and you can, But food grade actual vendors, like where would I go to get the hydrolyzed? Because, you could put these in a protein bar or in bakery products or whatever and get all these benefits. There's definitely nutritional benefits, and all the scientists are talking about it. Oh, look, like I was just reading a paper yesterday about I think it was some kind of cake, and it had more volume and it had all these prebiotic fibers, and they actually did some gut microbiota tests, and look, the good bacteria are going up. Why aren't we cashing in on this? I mean, more so, and maybe we are, and I haven't seen it. I haven't done a deep dive, but I would think that this would be all over. And again, the grinds are not that. They are just coffee grounds. But spent coffee grounds are something that's super cool. I love the upscaling. I mean, Gen Z is all about, I know there's a risk of what they call greenwashing, we'll say it's eco and sustainable and people will just buy it.
Carbon
and I think that happens with plant proteins, for example. Yeah. But this is a great one. But you need a company that's going to gather these from coffee shops and, businesses. There's a ton of places that I'm sure just dumps these things into landfills. And there's probably more toxic things you could put in a landfill, I imagine, than spent coffee grounds. Yeah. But they do release like CO2 and stuff, I think, when they break down. There's potential like greenhouse gas. And so why not just reuse them? Upcycle them, reuse them. I'm still waiting for somebody to do that. I wish they would.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially a waste product right now. So
yeah, and if it's good for you, I mean, let's just eat them. There are people on YouTube trying to put just straight up, not the pre-treated, not hydrolyzed, but straight up coffee grounds in different recipes. But boy, you'd have to be careful. That would be a very crunchy, I don't know, maybe a granola bar. I don't know about that. I'd have to experiment. Yeah. Anyway, that's fish oils and some alt coffee products in the news today.
There you go.
Maybe any of the listeners know anyone at like Black Rifle Coffee or any of these smaller intermediate coffee places that might be interested in doing a new process, drop Lonnie a note.
Yeah. I swear to God, I'm going to reach out to some of these. I think Black Rifle is pretty innovative, actually.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned them. Yeah,
you're right.
Seem to have like some super cutting edge stuff, seem to be very eco-friendly. It's probably small enough you could potentially implement stuff, but they have a huge volume now, so...
Oh, my God. Thank you for saying that. A big corporation, innovation, I feel like it just kind of goes out the window. No, all they want to do is slightly tweak existing product lines, right? They don't want to try something radical. This is radical. But that's what innovation is, damn it. Anyway, yes, smaller companies, that's true. Maybe I'll look into it. Maybe that's a niche,
Yeah.
Oh.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, couldn't hurt.
Let's go to break, and then we'll come back, and we're going to talk about competitive mindset. Hey everybody, Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. Second, please tell your friends who are longtime loyal listeners that they may see emails that share just the episode link and the show notes. This is a new thing, and we hope it will build community. Third, if you were a supporting member in the past, we may prompt you to resume through PayPal. but we will confirm each and every donor before reinstating that membership category. We'll never just restart your $4 auto payments without agreement from you. And of course, we will accept new members moving forward as well. Starting back slowly and honorably is the goal. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
And we are back. What I want to talk about today, it was like usual. I mean, stuff that comes to my head to talk about is stuff I just faced in real life. And of late, been dealing with a bunch of athletes again. And without throwing anybody on the bus, last night I was at a wrestling match. And the person went out there and did their wrestling match and got handled fairly easily. And they came off the match, walked up to me and was like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. You know, she's better than me. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. It's like, you can't go into a match like already lost, because what's going to happen is you're already going to lose. And from somebody who's trained athletes, for at all different levels, I mean, one thing I can tell you is the people that win, like, they don't think they're going to lose. Like, the step number one is just believing you belong there on that platform. And that's a big one to pass. And the hard part about this is, how do you get that mindset? It's like, that's a hard one to coach. I mean, I have ways to do it, and it seems easier. And probably just because of the realm I coached in, and much of it was powerlifting. So I figured out ways to do it in powerlifting. And it's also a much more simple sport than some of your, ball sports or whatever. But, like in powerlifting, I always lean my coaching towards, like, if you training to failure is training to fail on our competitive lifts. So, we would train together, like I've talked about it many times on the show. Like, there was a run of time where, like, for 5 years, I never missed a deadlift. And I never missed a deadlift until I went to pull that 800 and barely missed it at lockout. And I was literally shocked. Like, I knew when I walked up to a bar, okay, that what I do is I pick it up and I put it down. I had never done this before, but there was zero doubt in my mind. And you can see that with lifters, and I try and preach it on lifters. When you see somebody coming to a bar and, like, oh yeah, they're beat already. And what happens, even if as a coach, like, you're good for this, but if they're mentally beat already, like, they're beat. It's just, they're not coming in with that mindset. Or if you see an athlete come onto the field, like, we've all seen it. We've seen boxing matches or something. Hell, look at the old Mike Tyson boxing matches, the people that walked in the ring with him. Or the famous videos of Kaz when he was sumo wrestling. And the one dude, like, ran out of the ring. Like, if you come in just knowing you're whooped, like, you're going to move different. You're not going to lay out there what you have in you as you would if you come in confident. And I'm not saying, like, you need to come in to a match or a competition, like, just knowing I'm going to mop the floor with this person. You need to have respect for that other person too, that's on that high level. But you need to at least come into a competitive situation feeling that you belong. Like, I have the right to be here. I can do this. If I just put my game out there, I can do this. And I have a chance to win. So, I mean, you can't tell me, like, Michael Jordan never stepped on the court thinking he wasn't the baddest son of a bitch out there. Like, that's really part of being a champion, is that mental side. And I think it's a lot bigger than people think. Like, I'm no frickin' Kaz or something, but there were numerous times when I'd lift and people would come up to me afterwards like, you just pulled more than you can do. Like, you just mentally made that happen. And that's just part of mindset, though. And it's practiced. It's a practice mindset. Like this year with my football team, we lost our first 4 games, my little boys, and then they won one. And that mindset just flopped. And then we never lost a game the rest of the season. But they came into that next game like, look, guys, we can do this. And that's the only thing that changed with these kids, is just they went from totally defeated little boys to, man, if we just play, we can go, and they just believed. It went from them not believing to believing, and that was my coaching didn't change in 1 week to the point that they went undefeated, the rest of the season. It was their own minds. Just they got to a point where they believed they could do it. So, and that's basically what I want to talk about today is just stuff on that. How do we get there? How do you, as a coach, or how have you dealt with it, Mike? Things like that, or personally with clients, or do you face that with clients?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I find is, like you said, just I'll correct their mindset in the email much faster now than I ever did before.
Yeah.
And the luxury of doing it online versus in person, which I think are different skills, is, yeah, I think having in-person skills will definitely transfer it online, but online's almost easier because you can take your time and reply back to their email. And initially, I didn't correct their language and would kind of take a longer-term approach. And then I realized, oh, I'm probably just delaying their progress. So then I just started correcting it right away. And they're like, oh. And usually it's just as simple as awareness, which I got from Brian Grasso. Like, hey, do you realize you just said this? They're like, I did? And it sounds weird because, like, they typed it out. They can read it on the screen, you know? But it's such a subconscious thing. So the first thing I do is just making them aware of what they said. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, like you said, I use a lot of sub-max lifts just to get practice, good form, and just embed the reps of making it successful. And then I'd say probably the third thing is, even in more, like Dan John would say, fuzzy sports, where it's harder to, it's not just your absolute numbers in the weight room. Mm-hmm. There's probably some aspect of your game that you're better at than that other person. Yeah. Even though that other person overall might be a little bit better than you, there's usually still some aspect that you can exploit to potentially win. Mm-hmm. And you see this all the time in boxing, MMA, you know, even in the NFL, you know, that kind of stuff. It's the person who kind of knows where they're a little bit better at, and so they'll try to change their game plan around their strengths. So it's not as simple as, oh, wow, that person's a lot better than me, I'm going to lose, right? There's some strategy. There's almost always something you can employ. So I try to get them to focus on that. It's like if you tell them, don't think of a pink elephant, it's like, I thought of a pink elephant.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, here's our strategy, how we're going to attack this. You're being honest, like, yes, this person may be better with this and this, but you're really good with this. So let's try to push and pull them into this direction, and then you can be more successful that way.
Yeah. No, and that's what I was going to say, the part you brought up about the pink elephant. And that's the hard part about this. It's like when somebody comes up to you and, well, I'm really stressing about this. Well, quit thinking about it. Oh, yeah. You know what I'm doing now?
Yeah, that works great.
Now I'm thinking about not thinking about it. You know? So they stress about not thinking about it. And, so that's the tough part. And it's really it's a slow shift, and it's like you said, it's a mental thing, and talking to yourself. And one thing I try to put across to people is it's like, you just have to firmly believe this stuff. And that's why I always believed in super lofty goals. Mm-hmm. Like I always believed I would pull 800 pounds raw and beltless. And I didn't. And I probably won't. Let's be honest. I'm frickin' in my late 40s. That time's probably passed. But I made it to 780 by believing I could do 8. You know? Yeah, I failed, but look where I got by just believing I could do it. It's like the people that, you know, they believe they're going to win the Super Bowl their whole life, but they only make it to the NFL. You only made it to the NFL. You know, come on, dude. You fucking killed it. Just by inner belief. Well, I mean, not just by, but I mean, part of that inner belief leads to the ability to do hard work. Like when you believe in yourself and because generally if you believe, you enjoy something more. Like if you're just constantly doubting yourself, usually your training suffers. So,
yeah. And I would say a shortcut to that is hiring a good coach. Because maybe if you don't necessarily believe it yet, but that coach has a track record of doing what you want to do, you can kind of sort of borrow their belief, right?
Yes.
You know, because you're like, okay, so I hired, you know, one of the best people to do X, whatever that is, and oh wow, they've been successful with a lot of other people. So it kind of gets rid of all those negative thoughts in your head of, I don't know if I have the best thing, or I don't have the best information, or am I doing this right or doing this wrong? To me, I think that's one of the undervalued things that greatly simplifies stuff. Like, I mean, I know one of my goals is to lift the Thomas Inch dumbbell. So I was just hanging out with Adam Glass at his place, and now we have kind of a new, game plan of how to do it. And he's done it thousands of times and lifted heavier dumbbells, and he's also coached other people how to do it. So I don't ever worry if what I'm doing is not in the right direction. Because the grip world's weird too. All these people are like, but you don't hang out on grip forums and ask all these other people questions and stuff. I'm like, no, if I have a question, I just ask Adam and I do whatever the hell he told me to do. But I think that simplifies that, and that applies to the belief process too, because then you can believe in the work you're doing and have a good idea that you're probably going in the right direction.
No, that's 100% true. And then, like, an issue that I've faced with other people though is like, there's a fine line there. Like, even
definitely.
Like, I've seen coaches that have a entry level athlete, and I'm all about positive reinforcement, especially with new athletes.
Yeah.
Like, I want them, like, I need to become their friend, and they need to like me, and I need to support them. And then once I have them, now I can be hard on them. Once they respect me. But there's a point, like, one specific athlete I'm talking about, they're fairly entry level and new to it, and all the coach ever does is tell them how awesome they are.
Uh-oh.
And how they're going to be a state winner and they're going to get scholarships to big schools.
Oh, no.
And it's like, so they just already believe they're the best. And it's like, no, you got a long way to go. And so there's a fine line to walk there of positive coach speak and reality. And, so that's the tough part with that too. I mean, you don't just want a pin pusher person that, like, you got the Rocky music playing in the background and you already think you're a stud when you need 5 more years of work.
Right.
That's the tough part.
Yeah. Honestly, as I'm hearing this, I mean, I'm a huge fan over the years. This is my old man. I don't know if I'd call it wisdom, whatever you want to call it, but you have to build experience to get real confidence, right? If you're super confident and you think you're going to dominate from the beginning, you're just ignorant. Because you don't even know. You don't have any data points to say how good you are. And I think people that are introverted and sensitive, like what you do, Phil, I'm total agreement. Like, you got to support them. Yep. And until they start getting in the metaphorical reps, right? Yeah. Sometimes real reps, sometimes just repetition. It's kind of the way that martial arts work. You get so much repetition, then when you get out there and you're under stress, you just default to your training, and you have confidence. The only way to build, in my mind, real confidence is experience. Yes. And you used to compete so much, Phil, it didn't become that big of a deal. Like,
no, yeah, I competed to the point I was just comfortable there.
Exactly. You get to the point that you're comfortable. Now, that in a lot of ways, that's where the real work begins. Yeah. Because the technical stuff is done, and now you're using it for higher purposes. It's sort of like that Japanese concept of no mind. It's not just Japanese, of course. Instead of thinking about the pink elephant, you just no mind. You're just responding, zanshin, whatever you want to call it. You're responding to what's going on in front of you. You got all these reps in over the years. And yeah, let's be honest, it's going to take years sometimes. And you build confidence like that. Rob called this the cycle of dominance, right? Like, the more that you win, the more you're probably going to, because you have those data points, right? From a science kind of point of view, you got those wins. Yeah. And that's undeniable. That happened. You pulled 780. That happened. Yeah. So, and that gives you that inch-wise confidence toward 800, so long as, Father Time doesn't beat you down.
Yeah. No, and that's, like I said, I talked about my boys, and I could see it as their coach early in the season. Like, all we need is a win. Like, once we get a win, they're going to believe, because they had it together. They were mentally kicking their own asses. And it happened. The minute they won, I was like, yes, that's all we needed. And then they played. They just eased up. They relaxed. And, like we were talking about, like with the coaches, and that's like with them, I brought a very much, let's be real, football coaches have a persona in general. And it's the asshole that just rides your ass all the time. And, and people respect them for that. And I came in more with my powerlifting mindset, especially with my little kids that I've trained. And it's like, number one, my first goal when I stepped on that field was become these kids' friends. And yeah, we'd work, but I'd become their friends. And they'd give me high fives and hugs and stuff when I showed up at the field. Then, when somebody did something bad after 3 weeks of me being their friend and I yelled at them, it meant something. They were like, oh shit, I pissed Coach off. I like Coach. You know? But when your default's asshole, being an asshole doesn't mean anything. You know, they're like,
being an asshole doesn't work.
He's just being a dick again. You know?
No, it's no doubt. Like in counseling, you build rapport, you know, or like Mike was saying, you reflect back. Do you realize you said can't 8 times in the last 30 minutes, or small, or, you know, stupid, or whatever, what negative self-talk. But building rapport and then reflecting like that, that's the kind of stuff that I actually didn't really pick up on that much until some of the nutrition and dietetics training. They do a better job at counseling, I think, than a lot of like ex-phys people, which are kind of like, you do some health screening, make sure they're not going to kill themselves, and you put them on a program as if that's going to just stick. And if they're a highly motivated athlete, maybe it will.
Yeah.
But you're building rapport with these kids first. Yeah. Then you have a relationship, you know, that you can work from.
Well, and even for athletes, it's building a rapport with yourself. We're not saying being fake with yourself and telling yourself you're the best.
No.
But believe in what you're good at, like Mike said. Know that, hey, I'm good at that, and like have an internal dialogue with yourself and know that you need work, but it doesn't mean you're horrible. Just because you're not the best at one part of your game, you got to flip that shit to a positive. Like, that means I can get better. You know?
Yeah.
And that's
growth
not a
mindset.
bad thing. It's just growth. And okay, I failed. Don't cry in your soup. Like, use that as, okay, I just need to get better at that. You know, if I do better at that, I can win. And it's a positive mindset to everything, a twist. But that's hard. It's hard to pass that. Once you do, it's huge. But
I would think it's identify the problem. Well, I lost. What's the cause of that? Well, I got winded. I got gassed.
Yes.
You know, or my strength isn't there. I didn't feel like I could mop the mat with this person, or whatever it is. Like, that would be the objective way to do it. The challenge with coaching, I think, and I've never been a coach. You guys do a lot more coaching than I do, but the challenge to me would be that you have to, how do you communicate that? Like, you could be cold, dry, and scientific. Okay, your strength is only 80% of where you need it to be, or your VO2 max is only 80%. We got to get that, you know, compared to some norms, your flexibility, whatever it is. But then, how do you then motivate the athlete or help them self-motivate? Because ultimately, intrinsic motivation is where it's at. They can't rely on you forever.
No,
that's where the experience is going to come in, I think. Like, you know, the coach helped me identify negative self-talk or physical characteristics. Like, what was the reason behind that loss?
Yeah.
Because early on, I think one thing they need to keep in mind is you're going to lose probably a little bit more early game than late game, I would think, like as far as career goes, until you start having health problems or whatever, because there's a certain learning. I mean, now some people are very gifted and they don't go through a lot of that, but I would think you got to let people know, hey, it's okay if you miss the mark a few times, because it sounds cliche, but those are learning experiences. Like, what is it that needed work?
Then the tough part as the coach is then they're all individuals. And it's realizing, like, Sally responds different than Judy. You know? And what the individual athlete responds to. Like, I've had athletes that respond very well to, like, hey, man, you're good. You got this. You know? And then I've had athletes that if you get on them, they respond well to that. Like, I don't know if either of you guys watched the Kels documentary.
I haven't yet. It's on my list, but I heard it was good.
And it's so good. And but he goes in there and like they're like losing. They lost 3 games in a row, and he's like, "Quit telling us how fucking good we are." He said, "I don't respond to that. Tell me I fucking suck, you know, and fix your shit." And he's like, "I know I respond to that." He said, "I don't need nobody telling me how good I am." He said, "My whole life I've responded." He said, I didn't get a scholarship to college, so I made it happen. I was 7th round in the NFL. I was glad about that. That made me push harder, you know. And there's some athletes respond well to that. There's a few that respond well to negative criticism.
Yeah.
And I can tell you in my experience, that's by far not the majority. But as a coach, you have to ID that. Like if you're just up talking a person and it ain't working, well, maybe time to try to get in them a little bit.
And you could
Some
use a
people
little
do
humor.
respond to that. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Like,
too. I love getting people to laugh.
Yeah. Well, and you could critique and use humor. Like, what was that, buddy?
Exactly. Oh, hell, a totally different topic. But like once I realized when I'm giving public speaking that if I can make the audience laugh early, oh, dude, you got them. Done.
Yeah.
Easy. You just basically made friends with them all, so I can say whatever the hell I want. And they're gonna listen. But oh yeah, like it's a big one for me. Fun. In all sports, let's make it fun. Once they're hooked and having fun, they train harder, and they try harder, and they be better. Whereas if you're just fucking Debbie Downer all the time, oh my God, like I don't want to play for this dude.
Like a Jillian Michaels type of, berating. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you can't do that all the time. I mean, yeah, there's a fine line. There's a place for it. But my God, like I said earlier, if you default to asshole, you being an asshole means nothing because that means you're just an asshole. So
my favorite cue was when we were doing the process through the Special Forces experience. I won't say his name, but one of the guys there, former military instructor, and it's set up to basically kind of strip away everything from people. It's set up to be extremely difficult, at first, especially physically. People are going to be yelling at your face. And he goes up to this one guy, and he's like, "You need to unfuck your shit right now." I'm serious. I'm trying, just not to laugh. I had to, turn around. I was like, "Oh, that's so perfect."
Well, yeah, and that's the opposite.
Yeah.
It can work in the opposite way. Like if you get and you're an asshole for the first 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they do something well and you're nice to them, they're like, "Oh shit, I want more of that.
Yeah,
I'm going to do this." And so that can work on athletes too. And that's the tough part about coaching. The hardest part about coaching is that everybody's an individual.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so tough. And you have to figure out what each one of those individual organisms needs to make them thrive.
It's a good point about even a sensitive, introverted person. They tend to have higher IQs. You don't want to berate them nastily. They're not going to respond to that with aggression. They're going to, But speaking of stories, I had he was my nutrition mentor. He became over the years. There was a food science class, and to this day, my wife and I use this like a joke, but it was a mix of chemistry and food, right? So it wasn't just culinary. And you'd go around and everybody would have a product at the end, and he'd walk around and he'd look at stuff and he would just berate people. I mean, this was back in the day where he was not afraid. Like if somebody asked a stupid question, he'd respond and say, they say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Stupid! And point it. And I'm like, oh my God. Like you don't do that anymore. But he would go around and look at the food products, and then he would just critique or ignore, walk by, scribble something on his pad. And then over time, I got a little bit better in the course, and he'd say, "Acceptable product." That was the best phrase anybody, because that's as good as he got, right? Yeah. And because of that, you sort of calibrate down. So, now if Kelly and if we do something like really good, I'll say acceptable product, which sounds very boring and mild, but no. Yeah. But that's kind of that coaching, teaching kind of thing, right? Like, that was the motivation with this guy, because he was so flat that if you could just stand at his right hand for even a moment, you'd be like, "Oh my God, I'm special," Yeah. So it is funny how individualism comes into play with all that stuff.
Yeah, the best I ever got from my advisor was, and this was extremely high praise, was, "That will work."
Exactly. It sounds like satisfactory,
Yeah.
But no, it's actually.
And I was elated. I was like, "Holy shit, I can
graduate." Exactly. Rare approval. And that probably depends on the coach's personality, of course, too,
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, one of my other little phrases I like, and I don't remember who I stole this from, is that there's no failure, only feedback, right?
Yeah.
So the goal is to fail forward as fast as possible.
Yep.
Or the other phrase, I think Conor McGregor said this too, it's like either win or you learn. right? If you win, you probably didn't learn a lot, but if you lose, you're going to learn a whole bunch of things.
That's one of those things where knowing the path is different from walking the path.
Yes.
Like you got to. That's hard. What you just said is absolutely true and hard.
Oh, yeah.
Not to let your emotions cloud it. Like, okay, what did I do wrong here? And that's why the way you guys in weight training, and Mike with you with all the technology and all the stuff you use, the monitoring stuff. That's why that's so helpful, because you can actually point to individual things, like just to say, oh, it's a learning experience. Well, okay, this person's already reeling emotionally. So let's just say, what do you want to work on? What do you want to oppose? What weakness do you want to get out of you? And work on that specific topic with the idea that when you eliminate the weak points, eventually there are none.
Yeah. And for me, like, I use a lot of the data to, I don't want to say remove my personality from it, but to remove my judgment from it and reflect back to them that, like, this isn't my judgment. This has nothing to do with you're a good or a bad person. It just says, hey, your heart rate variability says your physiology is telling me that you're pretty stressed. What's going on? Or your bar speed wasn't as fast. It's not my perception of watching it, which, after a while you can definitely do.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's the number. Here's your number last time. Here's your number this time. Here's your number on the output on the rower. Here's what it was last time. It's not good, bad, or different. It's just
evidence-based.
Yeah, and it's not my opinion. This is a reflection of the output of your physiology. So it's like, what are you going to do about it then? And then most of the time, it sounds kind of very cruel and very engineering-like, which it is. But most of the time, they realize, oh, he's not just mad at me. I'm not a bad person. It's like, I just didn't do as well today. And then it's like, okay, what happened last week? Oh, yeah, I only slept 4 hours for 4 nights in a row. My nutrition was a mistake. Oh, cool. Okay, so now we know what's going on.
Yeah. No, it's a good point, Phil. I mean, the whole, especially with kids, I don't know how it works with their nervous systems necessarily. I'm not a pediatric person. I used to joke. In nutrition class, I hate kids. Everybody would laugh. And of course, I have them. They're great. It's joking, but they're a different kind of creature. In an adult, you'll hear stuff like, oh, hormone levels change, testosterone levels go up when you actually have that win. And that kind of is contagious across a team if it's a team sport and all that kind of stuff. And with kids, I don't know what the mechanism might be, but it's a good point, Mike. There is real physiology at work in failure and in dominance, right? In winning. It's just it's good to follow the numbers when you can. And then, the art of coaching then comes in because of the spectrum. I once had an old dietitian friend. She said, Lonnie, the biggest challenge you're going to ever see in teaching is the huge spectrum of personalities. Everybody has to be treated a little bit differently. And so that's kind of what you're saying, Phil. It's so true.
Yeah, my last point on the art of it, I had every once in a while have some people at my house that will come in, we'll do like their VO2 max, and we'll do a bunch of testing and stick them in the cold plunge and exercise and lectures and stuff. And they'll stay at a hotel down the road and they'll be at my place for like a couple days. And one girl was there, who's a good friend of ours now, and she's asking me, she's like, well, for training, like, how often should you give feedback in an online environment, like after they complete their session? And I kind of looked at her and I'm like, for you, I would actually wait 5 days before I would tell you anything. She looks at me like completely horrified. She's like, what? I'm like, because you're very good, you're very coachable, but you're doing stuff to impress me, not to intrinsically get better. So if I withhold my feedback from this process for a period of time, then you have to be more intrinsically motivated to do it. And she's like, oh. And sometimes I've had to tell clients that, and it's not that I'm just being lazy, because you can kind of tell the ones that just want to do stuff to impress you, which is fine, and that can be useful to a point, but it's like, man, long term, you have to be one intrinsically motivated to kind of drive the ship. So I'm going to purposely kind of pull my feedback away, especially if everything is on track. Like if it's a disaster, then by all means I'm going to say something like immediately. But a lot of times I'll just kind of, watch from afar, make sure everything's going well, see if they keep continuing.
Okay. Well, that was good. Now I got to go win.
Oh, yeah.
In the squat room. So
there you go.
Ooh, nice.
I don't think
mindset.
confidence isn't a big problem at your stage in the game.
Nah. Orthopedics is my problem.
No doubt. No doubt.
But
all right, guys.
Okay, everybody have a good one.
All right, see ya.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.